Hi, I'm Sherry Quam Taylor, and this is the Business Behind Fundraising podcast. Now, today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, that nonprofit overhead myth. You didn't think I'd have a season one of this podcast without discussing the overhead myth. It's super important. There's a statistic I share in, frankly, every webinar, most podcasts I record for guest appearances. And I share this statistic because honestly, when I heard it a while ago, it surprised me. It kind of stopped me dead in my tracks. And that statistic is from the Urban Institute Center of Nonprofits and Philanthropy. You've probably heard it. But it says that 91% of organizations have never reached that $5 million of annual revenue. And 77% have never reached that $1 million mark. So when I heard the statistic at first, I thought, that is crazy because who do we need more, right? Who have we depended on? Especially these last few years in 2020, 2021. This is who should have more, right? I also know the amazing work organizations are doing that are in that threshold and really trying to climb up beyond that number. And so we really have to fix that. Now, when I jumped from corporate to nonprofit a decade plus ago, I actually believed this statistic very quickly. Here's the scoop. So I had left my corporate job, joined a nonprofit that was near and dear to my heart. And long story short is it grew really fast. We tripled the charitable revenue in 18 months. And we did that because of the infrastructure, the systems, all the hats you wear when you're hustling and trying to grow an organization. But the one thing that we did do was we spent money. We invested in those systems. We did a lot of shifting from volunteer roles into paid positions. We really pushed against that concept that has plagued the sector for way too long, that nonprofits should do more on less. That's not true. We cannot do more and less. And so we grew tremendously. And I really look back at that time being such a blessing because it was my beginner's mindset, I guess, kind of coming into nonprofit that helped me really push against some of those things that I was being told, like, well, we shouldn't spend money on that, and you got to watch the percentages here, and nobody will fund you if you look a certain way. I just didn't believe that, and we saw tremendous growth as a result of that. And so when I started my own business a few years later, I really became a student of those statistics I shared with you, that the 91% never reached that $5 million mark. And it bugged me, right? And so I went to the why is that? And so I want to share with you today the 3 reasons that I really feel that organizations plateau and organizations get stuck. And I want you to think, maybe these are the things that are actually keeping us from growing at the rate we want to grow. Are these the things that are keeping us from doing all the amazing things in your strategic plan that we talked about a couple episodes ago? And so I want to walk through those 3 areas that really I see organizations struggling with, and I want you to make that pivot today. So this first one, you've heard the phrase, you've heard me use it. I wish I coined it, but that first one is irrational frugality. It's my favorite phrase. I fight it like in my personal life too. I'm like, don't be too frugal about that. Like, enjoy that, that dinner or that, whatever the things are we think we shouldn't spend money on. Is a phrase I heard on a podcast from Bobby Rebell. And it resonated so deeply with me because every single day I see nonprofit organizations being completely irrationally frugal. And it's actually what's keeping you from raising more money. It is. So we all know that you've got to be spending and investing in all 3 areas of your organization: your programs, your admin, and your fundraising. If you are not constantly investing in all three areas, you will plateau. Even though I know we really want to put most in the programs, and of course we will, but not at the detriment of then, having our admin and fundraising like on this tight spin cycle that never allows enough gasoline in the engine to actually grow. When you are not investing in all three areas of your organization, you're going to be landlocked when opportunities come your way. That amazing staff person who could like transform your programs comes your way and you can't hire them, right? Because you haven't been investing enough in the organization that helps you grow more revenue and helps you have more unrestricted revenue. It leaves you vulnerable to this funding plateau that I'm talking about today. And sadly, it really leaves you at risk in times of crisis. Hello, 2020 pandemic. And I guess I'll say 2021 too. Help us all, 2022. And so what I want you to hear me say on this irrational frugality concept is that when you invest in all three areas of your organization, it helps you raise more money. It helps you raise more charitable revenue. So I always tell people, or I guess ask people, like, would you believe me if your revenue generation actually could be impacted in an even greater way if you were more comfortable with investing and spending and budgeting and really understanding what that spend needs to be so that you can raise more money? And it's hard for people to believe that sometimes, especially when we've been told we can't do that for too many years. And so there's got to be this time where you make a decision to invest in overhead and invest in the things that actually will help propel your revenue. And then we put that back into programs, right? And so a lot of people come to me and I look at their 990 and, one of those pages that shows like the trajectory of growth. And oftentimes it's kind of like, well, we're not really growing. And then I go right to their program percentages. And if it's like 90, 91, 90, 92, and they can't figure out why they can't grow, that's usually what the problem is. We have to make sure that there's a moment in time, it's not forever, where you're investing way greater in admin and fundraising. And you got to be able to present the math, take the time to do it. But then you can start raising more money, and then we can put more money back into programs. The math works. I see it all the time. Organizations who, for a period of time, might drop that program percentage down quickly, not overnight. We're not quick fix here. But quickly, we will see that, oh my gosh, we are putting more dollars into program. So do not be handcuffed by these percentages. Do not be handcuffed by that overhead conversation. Know your numbers, know your business, and know what you need. And when you hear these phrases that I hear all the time, oh no, we couldn't ever do that. We want to put as much into programs as possible. Won't that look bad to our donors? Pretty sure a foundation won't fund us. Oh my gosh, our charity navigation or ranking site, if you will, we're not going to be gold star or whatever. Breath. You're running a business. I want you to make sure you are addressing the business behind fundraising first. All of that will straighten out. You can answer all of those questions when you have the plan. But you cannot be in this mindset of irrational frugality to accomplish that. And I'm going to tell you, this is what keeps nonprofits from being fully funded. This is why people come to me with these symptoms that feel like we should be able to fix them with a new fundraising things. But when people come to me with cash flow issues, when their reserve is too small to be helpful, their staff is on a spin cycle, we have to look at the root of all these problems. And it's because we are not putting enough gas in the engine and then helping the engine run at tip-top shape. I love talking about overhead. Okay, so the second area of this that really ties to this conversation of the overhead myth that we're talking about today is so often, one of the reasons that our funding has plateaued, so we've fixed the overhead concept. Sometimes we're just going straight into like, okay, now let's go do the fundraising things. Like, let's just keep doing what we've been doing year upon year. And we're not pausing and saying, but what is the story of the financing that we need? And so I call this concept, are we fundraising before we understand the true financing need of the organization? And so, of course, you've heard me say that I want you spending just as much time planning out the type of money you need, how that should come in, the donor segments that we really need to grow. And the reason for that is you just don't need more money, right? I mean, I've never met a nonprofit who doesn't need more money, but you need the right kinds of money. You need money that is unrestricted, that is flexible, that is from decision makers that you have a deep relationship with. And you because of that, they want to give to you every year, and they want to be generous because the relationship really is a win-win. And so often we jump right into all the fundraising things. Here's why that's a problem. Any survey I've given or taken or heard of that asks, development teams or even, executive directors, what's keeping you from growing? What's keeping you from doing more strategic fundraising? And that answer is always time. We don't have time in it today. If I had time, I could do that. If I had time, I could launch the Major Gifts program. If I had time, I could do all this stuff. This is what we have to shift our mind to be thinking about. That your time, every hour you're spending fundraising, has to be yielding the types and sizes of gifts the organization needs to fully fund the organization. And sometimes that's not just because we've done that 5K every year. And it's, where our time is like so dedicated to that, but it's not yielding the dollars that we need it to yield. And so I want to make sure that before you jump into the fundraising plan and jump into all the things that you do every year, that you need to understand what is the true financing of the organization. That ties to that number we talked about in step one. What truly do you need, including overhead? What is that number you need to be raising to? When you skip this step, you will plateau. I see it all the time. When my clients shift from fundraising plan to starting with the financing plan so that we know what should be in your fundraising plan, it's a game changer. Okay, third item I want to talk about here that really ties those two together. And that is, something that's not going to surprise you, but it's, are we doing the consistent activities that attract and secure larger donors? Are we actually moving from all of the transactional on the spin cycle activities that start attracting larger donors? So if you've been in any one of my webinars, you've probably heard me say this, but it's really a root principle of the work that I did. And so I want you to have this concept, and I want you to be asking yourself this question when you're thinking or talking to any donor, because your goal is to lead every single one of your donors to give their best gift to the organization, and then to help them and lead them to give that gift every year. So I want best gift every year. If you paused and thought for a moment, if all of your donors were giving their best gift, that'd be a game changer. Now, here's the beauty of this. If a donor is giving to you and they're giving $25 a month, and that is their best gift, oh my gosh, amazing. Let's celebrate it. Let's serve them. Let's help them see what their gift is doing. The problem is so many of our donors are giving, and because we haven't addressed step 1 and 2, and because we aren't really articulating the need of the organization, well, they're deciding what the best gift is for your organization without having a true understanding. And so if that same $25 donor a month, if we're kind of seeing over here on other people's annual reports that they're writing $25,000 checks, we've got a little bit of work to do. When you embrace this best gift every year, it really helps you understand the activities that you should be doing to be serving each donor in a way that leads them to their best gift. Now, so often we are actually doing the things that are keeping donors from giving their best gift. And what I mean by that is if we're thinking of these donors at the top of the pyramid, mid-level, major, and we're thinking about, that those donors are who we want to ask one-on-one. We want to have their experience with the organization feel very exclusive, feel very customized to really meet their needs, not in a slimy way, but in a win-win way that's really healthy for both parties. And so often organizations come to me and they've got the cadence down. We got our newsletters, our annual appeal. We've got our annual event. We've got the annual report. We do all the things. We do all the blasts, the emails, the appeals. Great. I'm so glad you're doing that. But those are the types of activities that really are attracting and securing grassroots donors. And so those people who are starting at the funnel of your donor pool. The problem is that major donors or mid-level donors, they're going to stay down in the bottom of that part of your donor pool if we're not constantly shifting them up into more strategic activities. And so we think about how do we move from only transactional to relational? We have to think about what does attract those donors. How do we treat them differently? And so those donor experiences look very different from the traditional news, e-blast, event type of cycle. And so I want you to start thinking about how you can really be segmenting your list and segmenting those people who are already giving to you, and start thinking about what is their mission for giving and how can we serve that? And how can we take the steps to really lead them to their best gift? The challenge is, the tricky part is, so many fundraisers don't know how to do this. And because of that, they avoid these activities. Is it way easier to sit behind our desks and create the appeals and the events and the newsletter? Yeah, so we don't do it. And so this is where, as leaders, you have to ask, just because your team is amazing at writing grants and planning events and doing all the things, that doesn't mean they know how to lead a donor to their best gift and lead those investment level conversations and sit down and articulate where we started this conversation, why you're investing more in overhead and what result that's going to be. You have to be able to sit CEO to CEO and have that investment level conversation if you're truly going to move into transformational gifts. Now, this is exactly what happened to my client, Jonathan. He called me after hearing me on a podcast, and he literally said to me, because I said it on the podcast, he said, I don't think our donors are giving their best gift. I said, well, tell me about it. Right. And so they had people giving. They had people coming and giving generously at events and giving, honestly, for years upon years. But what was keeping him up at night was that he knew they were leaving money on the table because these donors were giving really as a result of the appeals and events and that sort of cadence. And so I worked with Jonathan, his team, his board to really help him see the path through the first thing I talked about of the overhead and irrational frugality, and what is the spend he needs to take. And then how do we actually put a financing plan in place to reach that need, including your reserve, including your growth? What are the things our team needs to stop doing and start doing so we can start getting a donor's best gift? And we did that. We worked together 18 months. And his donors who were giving $10,000 and above We doubled that in 18 months. It went from about those specific donors giving about $1 million to over $2 million. So for his, $3 to $4 million organization, that's a game changer, right? But that's how much money was sitting on the table. And so the team has to learn how to lead, learn how to secure a donor's best gift. Otherwise, you will leave money on the table. And we can't do that anymore. So ask yourself from a spend standpoint, as a first step today, ask yourself, are you being irrationally frugal? Are you making $1,000 decisions, $10,000 decisions, when you should be making $100,000 decisions? These are the types of decisions and investing and having that mindset, having that lens on that are going to grow your organization. And there has never been a time in history when this is more important. I want you to walk in that window that's open and really transform your organization and just decide that from here on forward, you are not going to do more on less. I promise you, you can secure the funding that your big vision requires, but you must focus on the business behind your fundraising activities first. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you've enjoyed this content as much as I have, I hope that you'll like and subscribe and do all the things you know how to do, and even perhaps hit the bell that will notify you when new content's available. If you are listening to this on an audio podcast, please take a minute to give a review on Apple Podcasts. See you next week.